Okay, hello and welcome. I am Nick Kanoki, Director of Technology of the Asset Leadership Network, and I am glad for those of you who have joined us today, June 10th, 2021. Before we get underway talking to Thomas Smith, let us thank our sponsors. ABS Quality Evaluations and Onuma System are patrons of the Asset Leadership Network, and we are super grateful for their support. And as you can see, we have other organizational members that also help make this programming and others possible. We want to thank ABS Quality Evaluations especially and ABS Group because they are the sponsor of the month. And just a brief word about them. ABS Group provides comprehensive engineering and risk management solutions that support safer, more reliable assets and operations for multiple international markets. This year, it launched a suite of services to assist organizations reach ISO 55001 certification. Through its subsidiary, ABS Quality Evaluations Incorporated, organizations can be certified to ISO 55001 as well as other ISO standards. ABS has many well-qualified ways to assist private organizations, institutions, and government improve their overall business performance by identifying and reducing risks, as well as building trust in the marketplace, ensuring quality of products or services, and improving overall mission success. And with that, I think we are back to you, Jim. Although I would like to say, if you're out there watching, we'd love to hear from you. So send any comments or questions to the chat or the Q&A function of the Zoom webinar. And that's all I have.
All right, thanks, Nick. From Lander, Wyoming. Is that one of your photographs, Nick? Or?
Yes, this is my photo from just a few days ago, actually. Up here, you can see just the tip of the Wind River Range, the Rockies extending into Wyoming, and here in the forefront, Red Butte would be red on another day.
Nice. That would look good on a giant canvas print. Well, thrilled to have Tom Smith with us here today. One of the most memorable and life-changing, but very interesting at least, experiences of being involved in the ISO 55000 process is all the amazing people that I got to meet and work with from the United States and around the world. As a head of delegation, I quickly learned that Tom had a very amazing and strong voice and knowledge and background in asset management, and quickly gained the respect of the delegates from around the world. So he was a huge boon to the initial process and is still involved today. So welcome, Tom. It's great to have you. Where are you today?
I'm at home on my back porch in sunny and pretty hot Madison, Wisconsin.
How warm is it there today?
Low 90s, I think.
Yeah.
I don't pay a lot of attention because it doesn't do any good. So, but
that's great. I had the chance several years ago. Tom hosted a class, a sort of a trial class, I guess, at the time, and I got to go up to visit the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus and some of their facilities there, and take a class with Tom, and had some great discussion. It's a lovely place. I'd never been there before.
Beautiful campus. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Tom, we usually start with an origin question. So if you know where you are today, how did you get there? What's your asset management journey, or however you want to tell the story?
Asset management journey, yeah, that's better. We don't want to do the life journey. We'll just do asset management. So, actually, when I came to the university as a graduate student, I was in environmental studies, and I worked in environmental management as a graduate student and after graduate school for quite a few years, between 5 and 10 years, and mostly in the utility sector, mostly environmental impacts of power generation and transmission distribution. And then I had an opportunity. Not surprisingly, there are a lot of people who don't want a power plant or a transmission line in their backyard. And so the solution is conservation. And I had a chance to pursue some opportunities through the University Extension, actually, in developing programs in energy management and energy conservation. Started out mostly in the residential sector and shifted to where I was working mostly in the commercial sector, large commercial facilities, some residential, but mostly retail, office, sports complexes, hotels, things like that. So when I heard about asset management, it was kind of a natural. I focused on facilities and on infrastructure assets, but from an environmental or an energy standpoint, never from a kind of pure managing for their own sake standpoint. So when I had a chance to learn about asset management and what it was, I joined the Institute for Asset Management, started to read stuff, and then I had a chance to join the delegation. I really just Googled it to see what it was all about and got sucked into the vortex. So became part of the standards writing group. But it comes out of an interest in energy and environmental management and a fair bit of experience there. Almost all of it in the private sector, I would say. And that's something of a disadvantage or something of an advantage, however you look at it, because I'm sometimes a little perplexed by how we make decisions in the public sector, and particularly often wish for a little more business-like approach to public sector decision making. So that's neither conservative nor liberal. It just I see whereas many areas where we could be a heck of a lot more effective, so that's probably where I would say I'm spending most of my time now.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, if we could get the government to sort of think about what they're doing, and I think our ALN perspective is, if we had one ask, it's have an strategic asset management plan. So you think about what you're doing with your assets.
Well, one of our colleagues has worked, coming out of a military background, has worked with a National Academy study, and really what they're promoting there is a revolving fund for facilities maintenance. And if we're going to do facilities management and maintenance with just through capital appropriations, if we're not going to put money aside on a regular basis to fund the things that we know have to be funded, and every leaky roof becomes a capital appropriation, I mean, that's not a good way to do business. And somehow we've got to get beyond. If we ever want infrastructure to work, we've got to get beyond this this approach. And and the corollary to that, which is true with the university and other places, you get a lot of credit for cutting ribbons, but you don't get a lot of credit for repairing concrete. And that's where asset management needs more advocates, is in fewer in cutting ribbons and more in repairing concrete. But there's not a lot of glamour in concrete repair.
Yeah, so. For sure. Well, as we were coming on, Tom asked me about my background, and this is the John Lennon Wall from Prague, where when John Lennon died, people went to this one area, and I can't remember why, in Prague, and there was a big long wall around half a city block, and they started doing graffiti in honor of John Lennon. And they tried to stop it, and then they finally embraced it, and people come there and paint over what's already there, on and on and on. So, Tom, what are your thoughts on the personal experience of getting to travel around the world and meet interesting people and be involved in the ISO 55000 process?
Well, like you said, I've made a lot of good friends doing this and enjoyed the work. Get into a few arguments occasionally, but I've met some really talented people, some really good people in this process, and learned a lot. Absolutely learned a lot myself from a variety of standpoints. roughly 35, 37 countries involved, probably 50 or roughly 50 to 70 people who've been more or less regular, for the last 10 or so years on this. So the cast changes a little bit to a pretty solid core and a pretty good representation of countries with pretty different views of assets and different private public sector mixes and different levels of government involvement. So I think that's you learn a lot from that, because we can tend to focus on the U.S. experience and miss a lot of what's going on in the rest of the world, miss the opportunity to learn from all kinds of places.
Yeah, but have anything in particular you could share as a lesson learned?
Well, so anybody, yeah, I'll give you a quick one. I drove to Chicago last weekend to see my son. Anybody who spent any time driving around the U.S. Will encounter lanes closed for highway construction. And the department I was in, we had a number of people involved in infrastructure, and one of our highway experts explained to me lane closure, which is that the barrels go to the low bid barrel contractor. So if you're the low bid barrel contractor, you're going to put out as many as you can once and not take them down until you have to. So when you're driving down the interstate or a highway and there are barrels after barrels after barrels and nothing happens, that is a result of the low bid barrel contract. There are other countries, and England is one of them, where if you're going to do work on the roadway, you rent the lane and you pay for the privilege of, you get paid to do the construction, but you pay to have the lane closed. So there's a whole lot more incentive to only close it when you need to close it, rather than putting out the barrels in May and leaving them sit until October. So think about renting the lane when next time you're driving past barrel after barrel after barrel, and realizing that there are probably better ways to do business. So I started out by talking about business. I mean, closing lanes affects a lot of people.
It does, and highlights the idea of the assets in our personal life. We think there's I think a built-in prejudice to think about assets as being things we own, but the sidewalk in front of your house, the road your car drives down, whether it's open or closed, are all things that provide value to you. So certainly assets from a ISO 55,000 perspective,
Yeah.
shared by lots of
And
people.
you take them for granted. And one of the problems with our physical assets is that we have, generally when we engineer something, we put in a big safety factor, and things have lasted longer than their quote expected life in many areas. So we've gotten away with abusing things, both in industry and infrastructure. That's not happening so much anymore, because the software has taken over so much of the function of asset management, and that has to be updated and renewed and so forth. So as technology changes, that infrastructure life shortens, significant pieces of it shorten. The pipes and pumps don't shorten, but the lanes shorten as truck traffic life shortens, as truck traffic increases.
So maybe segueing off that a little bit is, I know I've heard some good stories that you have with the different organizations you've worked with or had a chance to interact with. But people are always looking for that good, the case study. Show me the case study that says I should go out and do this tomorrow. But, do you have, can you share a brief story of an organization you've worked with that, that it's easy for people to perceive the benefit from asset management?
Oh, yeah, I did an introductory session for a group a couple of weeks ago, and it's very tempting when you're talking about asset management to write definitions on the board and then write principles and write theory, and that just puts people to sleep. So I've gone to storytelling. If I want to talk about asset management, I tell stories, and if one of the stories happens to hit, then we can elaborate on what's involved in the story. So the last group I talked to, I told a story about a bank, a brewery, a department store, and a zoo, and tried to get something out of each of those that people would understand. So I'll tell you a story about Target department store, which is headquartered in Minneapolis. Competes on image. I mean, Target is clean and neat and well lit, and people go there because of the way it's built and the way it's managed and the way it presents itself. And I expect anybody on the call who's been to Target understands that. But they have an asset management program, and I happened to be there visiting, talking about asset management, when they were looking at an issue called low water cleaning, which is to clean the store before opening. They used to start at 3 a.m. so that the floors would be dry for a 7 a.m. opening. So they understood that they could do a low water cleaning, less water, less evaporation time, start at 5 instead of 7. 2,000 stores 7 days a week around the country, that's a lot of hours. So the asset management team consisted of the interior designers who select the floor coverings, the purchasing people who select the floor covering, the maintenance people who have to maintain them, all getting together saying, is this going to work? How are we going to do it? We're going to get satisfied customers. We're going to have problems. And then the parking lot people. Well, why do you need parking lot people? Because where does the dirt come from? Comes from the sand and salt on the parking lot in northern winters, or the dust in the summer. And then the team of engineers who design their entryways, which are designed to collect the dirt and keep it off the escalators and keep it off the floors. So all of a sudden you've got an asset management at an area where most folks would say, well, this is trivial, but it's at the heart of a clean store, an appealing store, and the interrelationship of the people and the assets and the vendors and the inside and the outside. And when you look at, and the reason I told this story was that when you look at the costs in a commercial building, almost 10 years ago, a little over 5 years ago, the cost of cleaning, custodial costs, overtook energy costs in most big cities. So if you're running a commercial establishment, you're paying more for cleaning than you are for energy. And we spent all this time about energy, but I never heard anybody talking about cleaning, and I've never seen a cleanability task force or an architect with a shingle that says, I designed for cleanability. I'm a LEED certified designer, but am I a cleanability certified designer? So next time you're walking around in a commercial establishment or anywhere, look at how this thing gets cleaned and what you could imagine could be done to make it quicker, easier, cheaper, and safer to clean. And there's a heck of a lot, both in terms of the design, operation, customer training, you name it. And that's, to me, that we call that management of assets, maybe, rather than asset management. That's a seemingly trivial but absolutely core example of why you have to put all the pieces together and think it through.
Nice.
And that's hard work.
Yeah. So it reminds me of a neighbor who works in healthcare and for the government. And he was involved in a team looking at the spread of infections, I think at VA hospitals. And they had looked at all sorts of things. And then they finally figured out a huge factor was the cleaning crew. The cleaning crew was coming in with mops and buckets and cleaning one room after another with the same mop and bucket and the same water.
Yep.
So all the high-tech stuff wasn't what it was about.
No, and I say it's sometimes people say this is a trivial example, but to me, it's at the heart of putting all the pieces together, the people pieces, the purchasing pieces, the image, the brand. It's, you go right to the heart of the brand and what makes the brand, what makes people want to come to your place. And that translates to managing the assets.
Yeah, yeah, good. So one of the things we wanted to talk about was, I know you worked on a paper on integrated asset management with the Aussie engineering people. Is that right?
Yeah, Rob Lewis, who is a colleague with Australian, just recently retired from Australian DoD, and I worked on a paper for the Australian Asset Management Council of Australia for their April conference. We wrote a paper on integrated management systems, and we came to this. I'm on the council for ANSI National Accreditation Board, so this is the council that accredits the accreditors, like ABS is accredited by ANAB. So I'm part of the group of people who looks at those and eventually votes on those accreditations. Rob has a similar role with JAS-ANS, which is the council that does accreditation in Australia and New Zealand. And it's very clear that integrated systems, that is probably starting with 9,000, 14,000, and then adding other standards, is becoming the majority of, taking over the majority of the applications. And we've heard estimates from 75 to 90% of the applications are going to be for integrated systems, where if you look at the high level structure of the ISO standards, so much of the documentation, so much of the system is common across all the standards. So,
right,
whether it's the data that you're collecting, the management structures that you illuminate when you're putting things together, there's an awful lot in common. And an organization can gain a lot of traction, a lot of leverage by integrating those audits and integrating the information presented to the auditors. So this is coming along pretty fast, and there's also traction internally in not having to redo that audit trail every time. If you talk to somebody who's in the principal for 14,000, 9,000, 55,000, you get pretty tired. You get tired, and your colleagues get tired of. Tom comes to them. Oh, guess what? We're having an audit. We need 3 days out of your week because we got to get ready for this audit. And then 2 months from now, oh, guess what? We're having another audit. You're not the most popular person in the place when you start to do multiple audits for these standards. So being able to combine them, being able to combine the approach into one as much as possible into one saves wear and tear on the organization and saves some auditing costs. So we just wrote a paper about how quickly this is happening. And I think I interviewed about 3 dozen either asset owning organizations or consultants or certifying bodies to see what they thought about where this was going. But it's clearly the way that ISO standards are going. And whether we will get to a single management system with a variety of add-ons for the various fields,
yeah,
or whether we're going to continue to have individual systems. Right now, each of them is accredited separately, although the audits can be combined to a certain extent if the auditors and the organization are ready for this. So there's work to be done, but it seems to me an absolutely reasonable way to go after this stuff, because the structure, we've spent all this time and effort to synchronize the high level structure across all the standards. So, and they come on at one standard is popular 45,000 right now. Is for safety and health is very popular. People building their building systems around that. 27,000, the internet or data security standard is growing very, very fast. So, it's kind of like a horse race. Different group, different issues take the lead at different times in terms of pulling along the organizations and who needs what when. So an integrated approach seems to make an awful lot of sense to me.
So beyond the ISO perspective, what does your crystal ball say about the future of asset management?
No, I'll say one more thing about the integration. And we wrote not just about ISO standards, but about integration across standards. ISO 9000 have been around since the mid 80s. And that management system structure has been copied into many, many government and industry standards. So it is possible to build an integrated approach to standards, which cuts across both the ISO international standards, but across industry and national standards as well. And I think I wouldn't want to leave without saying that seems to me a huge opportunity for making sense out of the world that you're living in. Worked with a big real estate developer in New York City who could count more than 3,000 code standards, rules, regulations that applied to a multifaceted development in Manhattan. So keeping all those straight, keeping all those together, there's an asset management task in itself. But I think that one's worth some thought. Where are we going in asset management? I don't know. I mentioned that most of my work has been in the private sector. There are huge advances in data gathering and in automated decision making in the private sector, particularly in manufacturing. And there are huge advances in not just outsourcing, but in assets as a service that are coming into the manufacturing and commercial sectors. Those have to hit at some point into public infrastructure. I mean, and I think we really need to pay attention to those developments. And I've tried to advocate for a lot more attention to data and data-driven decision making, and in many ways automated decision making for many areas of asset management. And there's a lot out there, but it's frightening stuff. I mean, it's the level of data that we can collect and process, and our ability to process that, and the biases that sneak in when we do that. They're all there, but they have to be addressed. I think head in the sand won't do it. And particularly when I talk to public infrastructure people, I think, well, somebody's going to come along and offer to take over your railroad, or your street, or your bridge, or whatever it is, and sell it back to you at a profit. So, are you ready for that? Do you know how to negotiate that? Do you know what to ask for? Do you know what the effects will be? You want to build a digital twin. Okay, that's one thing if you're building a factory. It's another thing if you're building an airport. All the stuff is going to be possible, but it needs some real serious thought and engagement. And so Nick's about the right age to pursue this stuff. So when I talk to groups, I always ask for anybody in the room who's under 30, because I say, well, meet me afterwards, because this is your problem.
Well, that's why I'm here participating and learning, and I hope to be involved going forward. Briefly, before I let you guys have a closing word, I just wanted to say thank you to our sponsors again, patron sponsors ABS Quality Evaluations and Onuma Systems, as well as our other organizational members. We are really grateful for the support all these organizations give to the Asset Leadership Network, because things like this would just not be possible without it. And especially ABS Quality Evaluations and their parent ABS Group. They are our sponsor of this ALN Thursday at 4 program for the month of June 2021. And if you want to learn more about either of those, it's abs-qe.com or abs-group.com. And then on June 24th, we will have Tim Ingram on this program. And with that, I will pass it back to you guys for closing words.
Well, I don't know, Tom, you got a few more minutes for some, I saw some other questions pop up in the chat. You have a few more minutes to spend with us?
Sure, happy to. I like to hear what people think about what I said and if I made sense to anybody. So please, if you want me to open the chat and look at it, or do you want to do that?
Well, Mike's been texting me with some forwarding some things. Mike, you want to join us and share a couple of those questions? There it is.
Nice, nice surprise join there, Jim. Thanks for asking. There was a question about how can government change what they are measuring so that instead of getting low bid contracts, we get contracts for least amount of road outage, because it's the owner who has to, I'm interpreting this question, but it's the owner who has to determine what the measurements are going to be. So if they're only contracting for low bid, then that's what they're going to get. What kind of measurements focus on results can be established for governments to start changing, you know, specifically for infrastructure?
Or you contract for performance, and maybe you contract it, you know, over short term, long term, medium term, but yeah, it's cost and performance, and you've got a costly disruption into it. I mean, that's, you know, that's risk, disruption, downtime. You know, those are huge costs. I mean, this is, so the low bid, you know, is one thing in terms of what you're paying for the barrels, but what you're paying for disruption is enormous, and that has to be factored into it. That's all. I mean, and so that's asset management. You got to look at all the costs, not just the direct costs. I mean, you've got to look at all of them, and there are plenty of ways, I think, to design this effectively. But no, we're used to just, so we're good stewards because we did low bid, right? We saved the taxpayers money. Well, is that I started off by saying we need to do this in a business-like way, and just saving the money is not the only thing on the agenda. It's providing a service. It's, you know, it's that road is a service. You know, what's the best way to provide that service? And sitting in a line of traffic between here and Chicago on the weekend isn't a whole lot of fun, as you well know. So
I think performance-based contracts is one way that governments can start changing the outcomes of their infrastructure investment. Do you have any examples of performance-based contracts for this person? Again, I'm extending their question, but
I would have to look outside the. I'm sure there are good ones available in the U.S. I don't have any good examples right off the top.
It doesn't have to be in the U.S. Are you just of any good performance-based contracts examples?
They have to let me dig a little bit in that. I'm afraid I can't.
All right, I'll move on to the other question. How is the evolution of software impacting asset management, and how will it impact the future of asset management?
Well, it's pretty hard. I mean, the software is part of the asset, right? I mean, you can't separate software and hardware in most instances anymore. And as the software evolves, what you will see is, unless somebody's paying attention to that, it will evolve at different rates in different parts of the organization. You know, so take the value chain view of the organization from supply chain through the support manufacturing operations, all the support operations. Unless you're really paying attention to that, you know, all the way through the logistics and sales. I mean, unless you're really paying attention to that, that software is evolving at very different rates, and the incompatibilities are just lurking, right? I mean, and we see this all the time. That's and the other part is that I talked about revolving funds, about updates. You know, again, if we're going to buy a system and not have update built into it, you know, we're going to end up like we have seen many times with organizations running seriously outdated software, and not only outdated applications, but outdated operating systems, because they're not planning ahead to keep up with this and keep ahead of it. So the budgeting model, the capital budgeting model, just simply has to be fixed in order to stay up with the software. And that software is not only changing, but as we throw artificial intelligence into this mix, it's getting much more powerful and much more difficult to understand. So there's a huge challenge, I think, in where the software fits.
So I have one more question that I wanted to ask you, Tom. Is we're both working on revisions to 55,000 and 55,001. You have a few words about what your hopes and fears are of that process?
Well, sure. I said I would be very careful not to overstay my welcome here, but so when I met the Target example I mentioned, the asset manager who was in charge of that was appointed directly by the CEO, who understood and supported asset management. We're going nowhere in asset management without TAP management commitment. And fundamentally, asset management is a business process. It's the business understanding that assets are necessary to support the goals of the business. And whether it's a public-private business, a for-profit or nonprofit, the assets there are to support the goals of the business. And I'm afraid, are in danger of separating asset management from business management. You know, we are going to play in a field that's where and if you go back, you can visualize the onion diagram of the asset management stops and then business management begins. Well, I think that's a terrible diagram. I think that's extremely misleading, and that if asset management is not part of business management, overall business management, then it's going absolutely nowhere. And I'm afraid that we're looking at walling ourselves in to a restricted view of asset management that does not engage the business, does not show the business how assets support them. So one of the things that I do when I'm working with organizations, I find out who their brand manager is. I have an interview next week with the brand manager for a large organization. And every organization has a brand. You've got a logo, you got a brand, you got one or two people working on it. The brand manager may be one of the most important people in the marketing group. So how do assets contribute to the brand? Ask that question. And if you have a comprehensive answer, then I think you're in good shape. But, it has to be connected to the business, fundamentally long-term. Otherwise, we're going to be going around in circles, 2 levels below where we should be.
Is anything in the discussions for the revitalization of the ISO 55,000 standards indicating that there's an understanding of this? Is there corrections to make sure that the asset management and business management stays connected?
I haven't seen it.
It seems like the market is doing that based on what you're saying in terms of using having integrated standard certification. That's kind of positive
Oh yeah,
indicator.
it is positive, and yeah, the market's moving. You know, and my fear, you asked for about this standards, is that it won't keep up with the changes in the market, and that guarantees obsolescence. As I say, there are other standards. Safety and health is one, and security, data security is another, that are extremely popular and moving very quickly. And so in a horse race, huh?
What are the numbers on those?
45,000, which used to be 18,000, and 27,000.
So 45 is safety, and
27,000 is security. Well, you know, I mean, how much have we heard about cybersecurity lately?
yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's good to know that that one's keeping up.
Well, and that goes directly to the. I mean, we've seen this in water systems, pipeline. Where, you know, that's direct utility systems. That's direct control of the assets. I mean, that's just about as tied to asset management as you get. If somebody else comes in and controls your assets. I mean,
yeah,
It's like stealing your car, you know?
Oh, worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we could probably go on, but I think maybe we're at a good point to bring it to a close today. So Tom, would you like to, any final words you'd like to say, or anything that we should ask you that we didn't?
No, I think I like Mike's question, and I think that you know, where we're going is that the marketplace is moving, and anybody who is involved in asset management needs to look around and look forward, not backwards, as this is going to change rapidly, and the external pressures are, whether they're cybersecurity pressures or climate pressures or whatever, they all bear directly on the assets, and they're enormous, and we you know, we can't wish them away. We can't put our heads in the sand. You know, I go out, when we're done here, I'm going to go back out in my yard and dig another hole, plant another bush. But that gets me out of thinking about asset management for a few hours while I dig holes. But you know, no, I can't do it forever. So
Yeah, so it occurs to me that kind of the first time around, alignment or some way of expressing line of sight, you know, was a big topic. And that what I hear from Tom is, and it sounds very prudent to me, is that this time we need to make integration the key word that we need to build around. So Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I
love your storytelling.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, and even if it isn't over at a baseball game over a beer, which we've had a chance to do a few times. But
well, we need to do another baseball game and beer, and I won't say anything about the Brewers and the Nationals.
Thanks.
But we can, you know, we can go watch the Anaheim Angels. Those were entertaining games, or the Cubs, wherever we happen to be. I'm always up for a baseball game and a beer. And
now, Tom and I are at one baseball game in Anaheim, and it was Christmas in July or something, and it was like,
yeah,
we had got some giveaway that was a Guinness Book of World Records, most giveaways for Christmas in July or something silly.
yeah.
I don't know. But we had beers.
I was going to say, Tom, that I really appreciate your storytelling approach to asset management success, and we'll definitely make some snippets from the case studies that you described and share those with you.
No, if you want to have me back sometime in the fall, I'll tell the bank, the brewery, and the zoo stories. The zoo one's pretty
You're invited. You got us.
good.
Pick the
Yeah.
date in the fall you want to come back.
There
Yeah,
you
we'll
go.
talk about the zoo and its assets and its liabilities.
Sounds great. So thanks, Tom. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Mike. And thanks to everybody participating today and everybody that watches this on the various channels through which it's available going forward. So have a great day and see you next week on ALN Thursday at 4. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim.